Hey there, Jeff Manchester from iZotope. Welcome to From Scratch. It's a new video series that deep dives into a tool and welcomes you to it as though you're coming in completely fresh. In this series, we take our time going over as many modules and parameters as possible, front to back, so that by the end you feel like you can be successful deploying the tool in your next mix or production. Today, we're going to cover iZotope Nectar. Nectar is a vocal-focused mixing tool, and it's great for sung, spoken, or rapped vocals. So maybe you bought Nectar some time ago and haven't opened it, or you've been using it for a short time and aren't aware of all the features and functionality that it has to offer. This video is for you. You can follow along with the chapter markers below, or you can use those markers to skip ahead until we talk about a module that you're really interested to learn more about. If there's a product that you would like to see featured in this series next time, please let us know in the comments. Now, without further ado, let's jump in. This is Nectar 3 Plus. I have it running in Pro Tools. A couple words about those two things, Pro Tools and Nectar 3 Plus. I'm going to be using Nectar 3 Plus, but there's another product that exists out there called Nectar Pro. Functionality-wise, look and feel-wise, they're nearly identical. There's a couple of things that are different about the Assistant in Nectar Pro, but overall, they're totally the same. So no matter what product you have, you're going to be fine to use either one to follow along. And as for Pro Tools, it's just the DAW that I have here that I use a lot. You can open this up and follow along in FL Studio, Logic, Studio One, you name it, okay? So we see Nectar 3 Plus in front of us, but I want to make sure that you understand how to, find it from scratch here. Hopefully you've downloaded it from Product Portal or the website. Go to your DAW, go to the inserts or audio effects in Logic or whatever it happens to be for your DAW. They make it pretty easy in Pro Tools. I can just type in Nectar 3 and I'm good to go. And now I have it in front of me. And if I play some audio, I can make sure that sound is reaching the tool. So I'll hit the space bar, solo my vocal.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Cool. So I'm seeing spectrum moving in the EQ. I'm hearing stuff in my headphones. We're good to go. First, let's get acquainted with the UI here in front of us. The first thing you should know is that you can resize Nectar 3 Plus or Nectar Pro. Just drag this little thing out here and you can make it smaller. You can make it bigger. Totally up to you. If you have a second monitor, you can stick it over there. And we have a couple of modules arranged at the very top in sequence in order of processing. So the first we see is pitch, then EQ, and then the compressor. I didn't put these on myself. They just loaded automatically. If I want to add another module, I can click on this plus button. And now I'm hanging out in this new window where I can bring in a de-esser. I can bring in a delay just by clicking on the tool. And they're added in sequence, right? Just like that. So now I've added a bunch of modules. If I want, I can reposition them. So I can click and drag this harmony so that it's ahead of the compressor, for example. I can bring EQ number 1 after the delay. So really easy to move around and customize the signal chain that you want, depending on the kind of music that you're working on. And maybe you're working on sung, rapped, spoken vocals. That's what Nectar's for. It's for anything speech related. As for the modules themselves, you'll see a couple of things that are consistent across each box here. First of all, we have this S button. Now what this allows you to do, for example, if I clicked S on the delay, is even though I have all these modules lined up here, I can press S just to hear what's happening on the delay and solo that effect. So let's hear that now.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Let me unsolo it.
I just wanna know.
So now I'm hearing kind of all this stuff. Or I can just solo what's happening on this EQ. Let me bring it up a little bit.
Is it you? You can say I haven't tried.
Or unsolo it.
To cross this great divide.
So it's a good way for you to kind of poke in and check in and see what's going on a module by module basis. We also have these mix sliders here, which you see across all of the modules. These are parallel mix sliders, and their purpose is to allow you to blend in just, a customizable amount of the effect that you want. Going back to the delay, let's solo it, and you'll see how if I bring this up from 0, we can add the effect in parallel. So we're adding the wet signal on top of the dry. Usually you have to kind of do some complicated busing and some aux stuff and send and return stuff to get things to come back in parallel. It's very simple with Nectar. Just one slider and you're good to go. So let me solo that and bring in the delay to taste.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you?
What I might want is something just kind of carefully tucked in there at 10. And also, a pro tip, hit Command and hold it, and now slide this up and down, and it moves in smaller increments. I double-clicked and it went all the way up here to 100. But letting go, we have a much more kind of liberal move with the fader, and clicking and holding Command or Control on a PC, I can really just kind of fine-tune in smaller increments.
Tell me lies.
So we know how to bring modules in and out using this plus menu here. We know what the S does. We know what the mix parameters do. I can turn them on and off here like this, and then they get grayed out when they're not in use. I can also, if I want, close out of them, like you're closing out of tabs in a browser, by clicking this X here. If I leave my mouse here and just click, it'll get rid of all of those modules, and now we're back down to pitch. And speaking of pitch, pitch is always going to be here. Now, it doesn't have a kind of on button like the delay does or the other modules do, but it's always going to be here and you can't move it around. It's always going to be at the very start of your chain. How you turn it on is by going to this correction icon right here and clicking it. And now pitch is on and you're good to go and start, fine-tuning the pitch of the vocal that you're working on. Vocal Assistant is some assistive intelligent DSP that iZotope is very well known for, that's designed to get you started quickly using machine learning and intelligent DSP to listen to what's on your track and take some input from you too and give you a custom starting point, a push in the right direction to just get you over the hump of vocal mixing. Unmask is a different process that uses a lot of the same machine learning technology, but it's for a different purpose. And don't worry, we're going to cover both of these guys. But I figured since we're doing a tour of the UI, I would click on, this window here so you see what pops up when you press that button. Now to the right of this is the preset menu, which is very easy to use and very kind of context specific here. So if you're working on cleaning up dialogue or vocals or whatever, there's the clean up twirl down menu. If you're working on dialogue, you've got dialogue here. If you're working on music, you've got music. I'm working on music, sung vocals. So I can click here and you'll see the parameters changing in real time as I move around the presets to find something that I like. And this is a really easy way to audition different blends of processing to see if one's going to suit my track, and then I can kind of tweak it from there. So let me show you how that works with the audio actually running through it.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you? You can't say I tried to cross the great divide. Your feelings don't go, but I still love you so. There is nothing I won't do to make it.
So that is how the preset menu works. And I don't have to stay within the menu if I want to audition different presets. I can click these arrow buttons here and they'll change too in real time.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth. Do or die.
And that is how the preset menu works. We also have two icons here, a question mark, which when you click on this will take you right to the documentation online. And there's a gear wheel, which gives you access to more controls and options. We also have an I/O or input and output section over here. Now, we have ALM and limiter at the top. Let's start there. ALM is auto level mode. What this is designed to do is replace the need for hand-drawn gain or fader riding, which is something that mix engineers do on vocals when they're trying to work on vocals in a mix setting to make sure that quiet words, sung or spoken or whatever, can be heard. They'll use a little pencil tool and draw in some volume automation so that the singer, if they're getting kind of quieter as they go down at the end of a sequence or something, they can raise up the level so it just kind of goes up. Or if they get really loud, you can draw in some automation and ride the fader so that they get a bit quieter, and you do all this by hand. Auto level mode is designed to eliminate the need for that work. when you engage it, you'll see a little diamond. And what this represents is audio being kind of carefully leveled behind the scenes to around -8 RMS. And this is going to hopefully mitigate the need for heavy compression or hand-drawn automation so that you don't have to level out the vocal. You can let the compressor be a more of a color or a tone thing. And if you do end up having to do any pencil automation, hopefully it's very minimal because the auto level mode will be doing the work. You can move this up or down to make the target more extreme, more quiet, more loud, or double click to return it to its default of -8 RMS. The limiter here is it's a limiter. It's a ceiling above which we don't allow the body of the audio to go. And when I press it, you'll see we have this little circle here, and this represents our ceiling. Our digital ceiling is 0. This is -0.1. So that's right up against the ceiling, but to make sure that we don't clip. And that little red dot that I just got rid of, that was introduced because there wasn't a limiter and we were getting a bit of an overage there. So let me make sure that happens again so you can see.
At night, tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
So this happened pretty quickly, but I disengaged the auto level mode, which is giving me a nice kind of consistent level, and we got that clipping again. So now that that's here, I just have to click this box. It's just a history showing that, something clipped. I'll press the limiter, and now it'll make sure that we don't get any overages. And sometimes a limited vocal sounds kind of nice. So you can bring this in. You can change the ceiling if you want to. It's totally up to you. And you can also change the input and output parameters here via those sliders. Now down below, we have bypass and match. What do these do? Well, bypass means you're going to stop hearing the effects of the plugin and hear the dry, raw vocal that you started with without any of the effects on. So when I press bypass and hit play, we're going to hear the dry vocal. And when I unbypass, we're going to hear the affected sound that the Holy Harmonies in the preset menu gave us. So let me do that now.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Bring it in.
Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you?
So you might be wondering, what's the match for? Well, the match is very important. As humans, we really like stuff that's louder. We think that louder sounds better. The reason match exists is to match the loudest level from the before and the after, so that you don't get fooled into thinking, wow, my vocal sounds better after it's processed with Nectar, and what's really going on is your processing is bringing up the level, making it louder. So the after, of course, is going to sound better because it's a bit louder than the before. So this gives you a very objective kind of before and after, and all you're going to hear is the result of these modules, the harmony module, EQ moves, the dimension module. We're going to talk about what these guys actually do a little later on, and the reverb. We're not going to hear that volume jump, so we can make an objective decision about whether or not these modules are actually giving us the result that we want, and we're not getting fooled into thinking, of course it sounds better just because it's louder. So let me bring the audio in and out again. My match is on, and let me bypass and unbypass this.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you? You can't say I haven't tried to cross this great divide.
So this is very handy to keep us kind of objective. Now we have pan and width. Very simple. Pan's going to move the vocal all the way to the left if I bring this all the way down.
Baby, why
or all the way to the right.
can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies,
Double click.
I just wanna know
Return it to
the
0.
truth.
And width is going to give us a artificial stereo spread of the sound. Have a listen. I'm actually going to turn off the processing so you can just hear the dry vocal get separated, and that's really going to help you perceive the effect of width.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
100%.
I just want to know the truth.
Bring it down.
Do or die. Is it me or is it you?
You should be hearing it on both sides
Is it you?
of your headphones or speakers.
You can't say I haven't tried to cross this great divide. You feel
So I think that gives us a pretty good understanding of the UI. We're comfortable. We can resize it. We know how to add modules, turn them off, solo them, all that stuff, mix stuff in parallel. So that will complete the UI tour. Now what I want to do is move on to the assistant. Now the assistant in Nectar 3 Plus or Nectar Pro is a really great place for you to get started mixing a vocal, which, let's face it, is the most important part of the song usually, and one of the most complicated things to mix. We use machine learning at iZotope and intelligent DSP to get you started quickly, get you over the hump, get you to a great vocal sound through these technologies, and also with input from you. So let's start with Assist. We'll talk about Unmask in a moment, but starting with Assist, if I click it, it's checked, and it says, I'll listen to your audio and create a custom preset to fit your vocal in the mix. That's what I want. So it's clicked. I'll press next. And now here's where we give it a bit of instruction, a bit of a sonic direction. So it's asking us, what's the vibe you're going for? Vintage, modern, or dialogue? So vintage, something kind of lo-fi, maybe good for jazz or indie. Or are we going to go for a modern vibe? Maybe this is a pop vocal, top 40. We want something clean and bright. Or is this dialogue? This is going on a podcast. We don't want a ton of effects. We just want to level out the vocal, make it sound nice and clean and broadcast ready. I'm going to go for modern because it's a modern pop vocal and that's what's going to work for me. And the intensity is how hard we want to push all the processing in Nectar 3 Plus to conform to one of these vibes, vintage, modern, or dialogue. We can throw the kitchen sink at it with aggressive. We can leave it kind of light touch with light. I'm going to put it into moderate, leave it at modern, and press next. And when I do that, it's saying, I need to hear what's actually on your track, and then make some decisions with those sonic directions, the vibes that you chose earlier, to give you a great starting point. This is what's different from the static presets that I showed you earlier. The presets don't really know what's on your audio track. The assistant does, takes that into account, and gives you something totally unique that's hopefully going to work for your session. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to feed it some audio so that it can do its learning pass.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just wanna know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you? You can't say I haven't tried to cross this great divide. Your feelings come and go, but I still love you so. There is nothing I won't do to make this dream come true. Darling, you can walk away.
So here is our after. So it's told us what it's done as it was doing it. It's very transparent. It sets up a de-esser to take care of sibilance. We'll talk more about what that is later. It takes care of the EQ both at a subtractive level to kind of cut stuff that might be muddy or resonant or sour, and then boost stuff with another EQ afterwards. It listened for the vocal register of the singer and decided, okay, I think I'm going to use these settings based on the register I'm hearing in the singer. So it's very intelligent. I'll press accept. And now we get to the other side where we have gate, EQ, de-esser, EQ2, compressor, and reverb. And what I'm going to do is just go before and after so you can hear the starting point. After all, it's just a starting point, not the end of the journey. We're supposed to take over from here. So let's listen to the starting point that it gave to us, going before and after with the bypass, starting with off.
Can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you?
Let's hear it with the song on.
You can't say I haven't tried to cross this great divide. Your feelings come and go, but I still love you so. There is nothing I won't do to make this dream come true. Darling, you can walk away, but I'll keep coming back to you.
So we're by no means done, but we are ahead of the game because now we have a starting point that we can work from. We can add modules to, just like I showed you earlier by going over to the plus sign and adding whatever we want. I can rearrange them. I could bring the blends up. It's really up to you what you want to do from here. So that is how the Vocal Assistant works. The other really interesting piece of tech that I want to show you in the Assistant, Unmask says it's going to carve out a space for the vocal by comparing it to another audio track and correcting frequency masking. Now, what's frequency masking? Well, sometimes when two tracks in an audio session are competing for space, the same kind of sonic territory, so maybe right-hand piano and a high-registered vocalist, they're in the same frequency territory. They're going to clash with each other, and inevitably, some masking of frequencies will occur. And the result of this, the sonic result, is that one of those sources is going to be less audible than the other because they're competing for space. It's like if you're taking a big group photo and everyone is mushed together in the middle and you take the picture and some people's faces are covered by other people. And, so what you got to do is tell the tall people to get in the back and tell grandma to get on the chair and the short people go in the front. Maybe some people have to kneel and you take your picture and you can see everyone because you've kind of untangled and unmasked everyone from each other. That's the same concept with mixing. Now, in this case, with unmask, what you can do is say, hey, my all-important vocal is being masked by something else in the mix, and I want you, Nectar 3 Plus, to unmask the two sources from each other. So what I'm going to do is go over to another track that I think is masking my vocal track. It's a track that's in the same kind of sonic frequency territory. It's a marimba track over here. It's this right here. Here's the vocal.
I just want to know the truth. Do I want to sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth.
So I'm going to go over to the Relay, which is a channel operations plugin that iZotope makes. And I'm going to label this masker source. There we go. So I type this in. You'll see why I'm doing this in a minute. What I'll do is go to Nectar 3. I'm back in the unmask menu. It's saying, hey, Jeff, what is getting in the way of the vocal? Now, there's a really cool thing that iZotope plugins can do, and that's talk to each other through a protocol that we make called inter-plugin communication. If you have other iZotope plugins, let's say I have like a Neutron and an Ozone and a Vocal Synth, my Nectar knows about those plugins because they can all talk to each other. And so why is this important? Well, I can go over here and select a source of the masking and look what shows up. It's the Relay that I just renamed Masker Source. I'm saying this is the problem. This is what's getting in the way of my vocal. So what it's going to do now is listen to both sources, knowing full well that my vocal is the important thing. And what it's going to do is place an EQ, some processing on that marimba track to get it out of the way of the vocal in specifically the regions of the frequency where the masking is the most pronounced. And it's going to introduce a subtractive EQ just to dip the marimba out of the way of the all-important vocal without me having to kind of listen and use the EQ and dip things down and kind of, get people out of the way in the group photo, so to speak. So what I'm going to do now is solo both and play some audio so that I can train and have Nectar listen and then unmask those two sources from each other.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth.
I'll press accept. Now we're not going to see anything change in the Nectar. We have to go to the Relay, and when we do that, we see this new menu pop up that says Unmask. If I twirl it down with this little down caret thing, we see a subtractive EQ. What I can do now is scale the amount of subtraction. If I bring it all the way to 0, there's no cut. But if I bring it up to 100, I see where the demasking, unmasking process determined there was masking between the two. This is the most egregious. It introduced a bit of a dip there. I can scale it all the way and make it 200%. That's pretty pronounced. Or I can bring it all the way back. Let's bring it up and then do a little A/B. This is like a bypass button I was showing you earlier, this little blue kind of icon here. And do it before and after. And what I want you to listen for is how the marimba doesn't disappear, but it gets out of the way frequency-wise of the vocal in these specific regions. And if you drag your mouse over, you can see that we have a minus 11.4 cut at 341 cycles, hertz. And over here, there's another one at 1.2 kilohertz at 11.1 dB. So let's do some before and afters, starting with before.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the...
So when I disable the unmasking, the marimba comes back up in full frequency, but when I enable the unmasking, the marimba doesn't go away. It just gets out of the way very kind of elegantly in this region where the unmasking has determined the most egregious masking is occurring. So when I turn this back on, I can scale it back, right, to make it not so extreme. I can bring it to 90 or something like that and then keep moving. If you want even more control over how this unmasking occurs, you can turn this into a dynamic subtractive EQ. And what's going to happen now is anytime the marimba is kind of doing its thing, then that little subtractive EQ curve is going to go down and start working. And then when it's not doing anything, it goes back up. So here's how that works. I press dynamic. We'll leave it here and watch how it bounces every time the source, the marimba, starts to move and activate.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just wanna know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just wanna know the truth.
If you want to get really technical, you can actually use the sidechain mode and have a sidechain source key in and have this, dip down every time the vocal's kind of moving and working. But I just thought I'd show you the basic parameters of the unmasking in Nectar so that you're familiar with it and you can use it the next time you're working. And I think that just about does it for the UI, the module overview, and the assistive features. Now, what I want to do is go over the modules one by one and show you how to get, started with them and how to get working with them to get great results in your mix. So what I'll do is start at the very start. I'm going to close out the gate, the EQ, the de-esser, EQ2, compressor, and reverb, and start with this pitch module right here. So once again, it's not on. We know that because this correction isn't yellow. When I click it, it turns on. You got to know that. That's how you do it. So let's start with vocal register. 90% of the time, I'd say you guys are going to be hanging out in mid. Now, depending on the kind of singer and also depending if you're hearing artifacts, you might want to move to high or low, but mid should have you covered. So I'm going to leave the vocal register here at mid. Now, the next thing is we have scale. In order to do pitch correction, we need to tell Nectar 3 Plus what the scale what the key, of this track is so that it can make sure to snap all of the notes incoming to a kind of pitch grid. If you know the key, you can just go in and plug the notes in here like this and go chromatic, major, or minor, move this up or down, these cents, or I can hit 0, bring this back. If I want to, I can do a custom key, and these are like little piano keys here, right? The black keys and the white keys, and just dial that in. But if you have no idea what the key is, you can actually use some intelligence here in auto detect. When I press this, again, you see a lot of the same language. It's going to wait and try to learn what the key is and give me its best guess at the furthest left here of the options. There's going to be 3 that show up, okay? So the one at the furthest left is like its best guess. Now, I happen to know the key of this song, but you don't. So what I'm going to do is just play a little bit and see if the auto detect gets it right in the pitch module.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do
All right,
or
so
die.
it seems to think it's B minor.
Is it me or is it
I'll click
you?
B minor, press the check mark,
you?
and if we actually go to the track here, it's B minor. Lead vocal dry, B minor, 100 BPM. So it got it right. So now we know that we're in the right territory with the pitch, and we're good to go. We know vocal register. We know what scale does. Now over here, the strength is like how intensely it's going to be correcting the incoming audio according to the scale that we've set out. Now, when I bring this slider all the way to 0, it's going to give us a more natural pitch correction. If I bring it all the way to 100, it's going to give us very snappy pitch correction. And what we're going to lose is a little bit of the natural vibrato, but it's also going to introduce an effect that I think a lot of people are going for. So I'll move between 0 and 100% strength so you can hear the difference.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
Now she's already very much in pitch, so all we're getting really is the effect of the pitch correction, which is what a lot of people want. So I'll leave it at 100 and I'll move over to speed. And this is in milliseconds how quickly, again in milliseconds, it's snapping those notes according to the scale. If we go to 0 milliseconds, we're really going to get that auto-tuney kind of pitchy effect. If we go to around 200, we're going to get a more smooth, natural pitch correction. But again, most people, what they want is this very kind of quick 0 millisecond effect to get that auto-tuney sound. So have a listen as I go between those extremes.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
Now, there's also formant. This is going to scale the formant, the kind of micro-pitchy aspects of the vocal up or down. You can shift them here and scale them over here. Let's just twirl some knobs and see what comes out.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
And one thing you can do is automate all of these parameters. I talked a little bit about hand-drawn volume automation earlier with the auto level mode. You can automate these to come on and turn off at certain points in the song if you want to create drops or interesting moments in your vocal production. Just saying that, calling that out. So that is the pitch module. Now, the other thing I should say is that the pitch module can talk to another module in Nectar 3 Plus called the harmony module, which is another way to work with kind of vocal harmonies and pitched harmonies. And the way that it can talk to the pitch module is through this scale. So for you to add artificial copies of the vocal, which is the harmony module's main job, we'll get into it, don't worry, it needs to know the scale too. So you can set the scale by clicking here. It'll jump you over to the pitch module. We're already good to go. We've already selected B minor. So just so you know, that's how that works. We go over here and now we're kind of pitch ready for additional harmonies to come in, and we'll explore this module in earnest a little later on. So that is the pitch module. And let's jump now to another set of modules, which I think are maybe the most popular modules in Nectar 3 Plus, which is the EQ. So go to the drop-down menu. You guys are probably used to the order of operations by now. Click EQ. There's actually 2 EQs in here, and they're both 24 bands each. That's 48 bands of EQ. And the reason we use EQs in vocals or in any kind of mixing is to get control over the tone of whatever sound source we're working on. One of the nice things is you are set up from the get-go with certain moves baked into the shapes of the filters here. So right off the bat, you see we have a roll-off here on the first node. And this is because in vocal production, what a lot of people do is they will roll off low end, which is usually where a lot of rumble lives and stuff, to clean that away so that it doesn't muddy up the mix. So already we have a shape here set to high pass. We're allowing the highs to pass. That's why it's called that. Low end. So it rolls them right off. Another move that's very typical in vocal mixing and mixing in general is to add a bit of a shelf at the very end to bring up the sparkle, the tone, right? You don't have to configure the shape of that, shelf, because it's already baked into number 4 here. When I bring this up, look, it's already an analog high shelf. Or I can duck out some of that energy and bring down the shelf. And usually what we're doing in between 100 cycles and 10,000 cycles is doing bell dips and boosts. And what do you know? Number 3 here is already in a bell shape. So that's just something you should know. You can change the shapes, of course. So let's say I want to add a node and make it shape something very specific. I click on the drop-down menu. I'm given all these kind of subfolders of EQ shapes: bell, low shelf, high shelf, and you can see the little icon to tell you what it is. High pass, and it's very easy. Let me add a Baxandall shelf right here, and there we go. So that is how that works. You saw me do a little something over there, which is adding nodes. Hit this plus button anywhere. A node is created over here, over here, over here, or with your mouse, just double click. Let's say I'm over here, double click, a node appears. Double click down here, a node appears. Double click, and then just kind of do your work that way. You can also select all of them like this by clicking and dragging, and you can move them all around. It's, totally up to you. Or you can hit delete and then close them all out. And we're left with this over here. So now we have a totally blank canvas to work from. And just like before, this is going to be a high pass. This is going to be a shelf. Very simple to use and get your head around. Now I want to talk about some of the functionality of the EQ that's really novel and fun to use. And that is a follow technology that we have called EQ Follow. So sometimes when you're mixing, you get a kind of resonant frequency or something that's kind of sour that just sticks out. That can be problematic because it is kind of loud in our ears, it's resonant, it's annoying, it's honky, or it's kind of tinny, and it moves around. We can actually attach a node to that resonant frequency like a bodyguard that just follows it around and have it follow it and subtract, kind of control its energy as it moves around throughout the course of a performance. So let me show you what that actually looks like. So if I go here and play some audio, let's look to see where the peaks are.
Baby, why
so I'm seeing one here, one here,
tell me lies.
A couple over here. So this guy's a little peaky. So all I have to do, hit the plus button here, or plus button shows up, click it. I'll go over here and go to frequency follow. And now when I dip, I've assigned a node to follow this resonant frequency around and suppress it. If I decide I actually want it to be on the next harmonic up from this, all I have to do is move it over. And now it's attached itself to that node. And now it's attached itself to the next harmonic. Same thing, I just move it up. You can also have it accentuate a certain harmonic, like that, and do a boost. If I want to rein in the cue, narrow it, or broaden it out, I just pull these two handles and it moves open and closed. I can also make this a good old-fashioned dynamic EQ node in that anytime energy crosses a threshold that I determined, it ducks and dips out that energy. So this is maybe a less sophisticated kind of following, but it's maybe a more traditional dynamic dip that we're used to with EQs. So to do that, I'll click here, I'll go over to gain instead of frequency, and now it's going to dip down the gain when it passes a threshold here in whatever region you leave it with your mouse.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
So that's another way to add dynamic suppression, if you will, of certain energy depending on what you're working on. So those are the main operations of the EQ. We could go much deeper, but I think we have a lot of other modules that I want to make sure that we cover. One last thing I'll say is, why do we have two EQs? Well, a lot of people, and actually if you saw in the vocal assistant example, like to use two EQs to do different jobs. The first EQ's job is to take care of the housekeeping. So to dip down, to suppress, to use subtractive EQ. And then the next EQ, once you've taken care of sourness, harshness, whatever, you use not to subtract, but to boost, to brighten whatever you want to do. And that's because you want to take care of those problems like housekeeping. You want to take care of resonance and mud or whatever in the first stage, so that when you bring things up down the road, down the chain with an EQ or something else, those problems don't come up, with your boosts. So we kind of take care of stuff and then boost things once the coast is clear and we've cleared up all the problems. That's one reason why you might want to use two EQs, just for example, okay? Now let's talk about the compressor. Compression in vocals is very, very important. I mentioned earlier with the ALM auto level mode, it's good for smoothing vocals out. That's the main job of a compressor. A compressor is designed to control, sometimes reduce dynamic range. So we make the quiet parts as loud as the loudest parts and level everything out. So that's why we have a compressor in Nectar. In fact, that's why we have two, because some people like to do two stages of compression. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just have one compressor over here. The threshold, this is what's going to trigger the compressor to work. We have ratio, attack, release, makeup. Now we've done a ton of articles at iZotope on how compressors work. We've done seasons of Are You Listening, our mastering and mixing series on compression. So please go there for a full dive, but I'll just explain how the module works in the context of Nectar in a vocal. So we bring down the threshold and we're able to see a couple things happen when audio moves through the compressor. So let me turn the audio on.
Baby, why can't you sleep?
The audio is below our threshold. We need to bring the threshold down to trigger compression.
I just want to know the truth.
So now what we're seeing is the gain trace pushing down peaks and levels.
Is it you?
We're seeing a couple things. We first have this first trace in white This represents our audio before it was compressed, and the gray behind it shows the audio after it was introduced to compression and eventually brought up through makeup gain over here. So we have a very educational window into how the compressor is behaving, how quickly it's moving, and what it's doing to our audio at a waveform level. So I can decide to back off the compression a bit, or I can make it even more extreme. And I can see in the gain reduction meter here, we're reducing the audio at minus 14 dB, which means we've got to bring it back up that much after it's compressed. So we have a very compressed sound right now.
You can't say I haven't tried.
I could play with the ratio, I could play with the attack, the release. I could also play with the kind of compression that I want through the algorithms here. We have a digital algorithm, a vintage algorithm, an optical algorithm. This is very close to an LA2A.
I'll keep coming back to you.
And a solid state algorithm. All these different algorithms have different kind of properties and sounds to them and colors to them, and I would recommend that you get to know compression and use it as a tonal shaping device, more so than a dynamic range shaping device. That's why, folks use two. They might use one to control the body of the audio and another to impart a color or a tone. And another thing you can do is you can actually you can really squash things. Let's just get some pretty insane settings here. Bring the threshold all the way down. And then you can use this parallel trick to bring in the wet compressed audio over top of the dry and get a kind of blend of both.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Let's bring in the compressed
Tell
sound.
me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Is it you?
And before.
You can't say I haven't tried.
After.
To cross this great divide. Your feelings come and go.
Let's hear it in the mix.
But I still love you so. There is nothing I won't do to make this dream come true. Darling, you can walk.
So this vocal is already pretty compressed, but adding the compression afterwards just kind of pushes it up in front of the glass a bit more. And also, I get to show you what the compressor does in Nectar. So let's keep moving to another tool we use to control sound, and that is a de-esser. So I mentioned earlier in the vocal assistant section that the vocal assistant actually sets the de-esser settings for you, which is really, really, really handy. Usually you have to set them up by hand, which I'm going to do now. But if you're new to de-essing, which is controlling sibilants, by the way, so harshly or strongly stressed consonants like tss, tsh, that's what a de-esser is for, to get rid of that sibilance or at least control it. So in this vocal, let me just set up a loop here that's pretty representative of some S's.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
So when she says sleep at night and tell me lies, those are just a little bit harsh on my ear. So we have a range here, which we can kind of use as the flashlight for where in the frequency spectrum we're looking for sibilance. So I can change the cutoff, it's called, to look from 2.6 kilohertz and above all the way to 20, or make it 8K and above. Usually sibilance sits at around 2 to 15, 20K, usually not all the way up to 20K, but it's sometimes in that range. So let's just leave it here and see what we get. We can adjust it later if we want to. I can also bring down the threshold, and this is just like a compressor. So once we get audio kind of bumping up against this threshold, that's when the de-essing, the suppression, is going to be triggered, and that's when the processing happens. Now, the handiest tool, I think, out of all the parameters in the de-esser is the listen function. And this lets you listen to what is triggering the processing in the de-esser. So why is this important? If you listen to what's feeding the compressor, the de-esser in this case, and you're hearing, articulation of words and stuff, that's not good. All you should be listening for is s, ch, f, that kind of thing, sibilance. And when you're hearing that and only that, that's when you know that you've got your threshold set in the right place. If you're hearing articulations of words, I think you've gone way too far, and you could be messing with the kind of tonality of the vocal, or spoken vocal, rap vocal, whatever. So let's listen and bring the threshold all the way down, and then back it off until we just hear the ch kind of thing. All right, here we go.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
First of all, I have pressed the ear, right?
I just wanna know.
You'll hear everything. Hit the ear, you'll just hear what the compressor is listening
Is it
to.
me or is it
Now let's back it off.
Baby, why can't you sleep? Tell me this truth. Baby, can't you sleep?
I'm actually going to bring the cutoff up a little bit. So I'm hearing a breath in there. I don't mind that. I'm also hearing the kind of thing. I'm here. Oh, there's a word. I don't like that. Let me back it off a little bit more. Okay, cool. I think we have a good place for our processing. Back it off a little bit more. Now let me turn off the ear.
I wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
So I'm going to go before and after with the de-esser. Listen to sleep at night and how much softer it is with our de-esser settings in place. Here's before.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
After.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
Listen to when she says tell me lies, before and after too. Here's before. So now we're going to listen for sleep and tell me lies. Much softer after the de-esser is introduced.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth.
So much softer, and this is a process that you would use before compression and saturation stuff that brings up the body of the audio. You can do whatever you want, but I'm just giving you kind of general rules of thumb. And once you've taken care of the housekeeping stuff, subtractive EQ, de-essing, that's when you bring the body up, knowing you're not bringing up all those sonic problems because you took care of them, right? So that is the de-esser. Let's move over to another kind of corrective tool. It's a gate. Its utility and function is very, very simple. Basically what it is a way for you to determine what's going to get let in to the audio and what's going to get cut out. Kind of like when you're a kid and you have to be this tall to ride the roller coaster, otherwise you can't get let on. If certain audio signals fall below, they're too short to ride, so to speak, the threshold that we determine, they get cut out and reduced and attenuated. Now, how quickly they get attenuated and shoved down is up to you based on these settings over here. But anything that is above your threshold, that continues to be heard. So have a listen here.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
So basically, I've set my threshold all the way up here, meaning everything that falls below this is getting attenuated, turned down. So right now, nothing can get through. Everything is too short to ride, so to speak. So let me bring this down.
Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth. Do or die.
So we see these peaks. These peaks, these are loud enough that they make it into our gate.
Baby, why can't you sleep at
But those that are
night?
quieter get rejected and cut out by the gate. So stuff down here. And I want to draw your attention to some of these audio signals that are below at around minus 30 decibels. Stuff like breaths and stuff. This is what's getting cut out by the gate. I'm going to turn the gate off and let's look and listen for a breath.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just want to know the truth. Do or die.
So there's a breath right here. I know it's sliding by, but it's right there, okay? Let me turn the gate back on and bring this down.
Baby, why can't you sleep
So there's a
at
breath.
night? Tell me lies.
There's a breath.
I just want to know the
There's another
truth.
one.
Do or die.
There's another one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the gate so that the stuff that's too quiet, that's below my line here, my open line, it's going to get rejected and attenuated. Anything that falls above is going to keep going in. So this is what a gate's designed to do. We use this a lot on drums to reject bleed. So if I have a mic on my snare and I'm hearing hi-hat bleed because it's leaking into my snare mic, the snare is going to be really loud. So I can set my threshold such that, anything that's too quiet gets cut out, but the snare is nice and loud, that gets to stay. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, but I'm using it to reject breath bleed. So have a listen now that I've looked at where my breaths are with this really helpful waveform trace. I've set my open threshold here, and we'll just leave it and hopefully hear no breaths.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die.
So here's before.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
And here's after.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me.
So I'm not being very detailed with my open and close. This is a hysteresis, by the way. Parameters. I just kind of want to give you a quick overview of how the gate works so we can move on to maybe some more fun modules. But now you know what the function of a gate is and why one might use it in a vocal mixing context. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is show you what the saturation module does. Here's where we get to have fun and add certain color and tone and vibe to the vocal. And saturation is one way to do that. Now, what saturation is going to do is add harmonics over top of the signal in certain areas depending on what algorithm you choose. We have a bunch here. We have analog, retro, tape, tube, warm, decimate, and distort. And you can dial in the amount of distortion you want and use this visualizer to see where, given the algorithm that you're using, that harmonic kind of enhancement is occurring in the frequency spectrum. So let's start with tape.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
So we see a heavy concentration over here
is it me or
and
is
over
it
here.
You? Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Let's choose another
Tell
algorithm.
me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
Let's try decimate.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Now, of course, we have the mix control, which allows me to blend in the amount of the effect to taste. So we don't have to have everything or nothing. We can have kind of the best of both worlds. So let me bring it from 0 all the way in and hear what decimate's doing to the vocal.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
I could leave that there. It's going to lock it. And now I can go between different algorithms and it's always going to stay at this position. So I can, hear a delicate kind of serving of saturation as I move between these modules here.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
I really like tape. Let me actually unsolo this and get a good sound here.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
So saturation just warms up the vocal and in some ways can help it cut through a mix or compete better with other instruments that are kind of in its frequency territory. And that is what saturation does. And that's what the saturation module here in Nectar does. So I have delay, reverb, and dimension all lined up here. Let's turn on delay. And I'm not going to go over every single parameter here. We've made some tutorials on how to actually use this and get, really great sound. But I do want to talk about the major ones here. We have the ability to sync the copies, the delayed signal, to the host tempo, or we can disengage this and then we'll get millisecond delay values. And you'll notice that when I move this up and down, the other one moves too, and that's because I have the left and right kind of echoes linked. I can unlink them though and control things independently. I can also control the feedback. So we send the signal back into the delay to cause that like delay, right? That's the feedback's job. We also have some parameters here that allow you to add a bit of a tone and a vibe to the copied signal only. We can add a digital kind of clean digital vibe or a tape vibe or a warm analog vibe or grunge vibe. And we can also modulate with rate and depth the copied delayed signal too. So what I'd like to do is just kind of mess around a little bit. I'm going to sync things to the host tempo, and let's do a really kind of quick, snappy delay sound here. And I'll bring this all the way wet to 100% so you can hear what this sounds like.
Can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know.
Now, obviously that sounds pretty extreme, but what I want to do is just tuck it in a little bit using this mix parameter so that we get a bit of body and depth from the delay.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
Back it off a little bit.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
So this just gives it a nice kind of space. It's not reverb, it's time-based, but it just kind of fills it out a little bit. Let me turn the delay off. Put it back on.
Is it me or is it you? Baby, why?
Another really cool parameter that we have is an EQ, which protects certain sections of the frequency spectrum from the delayed effect. This is really great because sometimes if you're using very liberal kind of helpings of delay through the mix here, you can really accentuate sibilance or muddiness if you allow the entire signal to get processed with delay. So with this EQ, you can drag these nodes in and protect certain regions from getting a dose of delay, which is really handy. So we can have a very tight, controlled delay sound.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Bring this up.
Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
Bring it out.
Do or die, is it me or is it you?
So now the is it, that gets kind of splashy and delayed.
Can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know.
So I can control the sound, bring this in.
Do or die,
Bring this in.
is it me or is it you?
So now we get a much more controlled delay sound, and we do it without having to add another EQ before or after. Everything is all built in here to Nectar 3 Plus. So that is a brief overview of the delay module. Again, we've made a lot of tutorials on how to really master this tool, but here I just want to show you what does what and how things work. Let's move on to the reverb. Very, very similar. Right away, you'll notice that we have an EQ, which also protects certain areas of the dry signal from getting wet with reverb, and this is great for a tight, controlled reverb sound. We have pre-delay, decay, width, and saturation. Pre-delay just holds the fire of the reverb signal a little bit, well, depending on how much, 176 milliseconds or not very much. And this just gives a bit of separation and space between the copied reverb signal and the dry source signal, and this can help with some intelligibility. We have decay as well, how quick or how slowly the decayed reverb sound fades away. Width, which just adds some dimension, and saturation, which adds, well, saturation to the copied reverb sound. So if I bring this all the way up at 100%, this is what it sounds like.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
I'm going to bring the saturation down.
I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you?
It sounds pretty nice, but
Baby, why
it's a little splashy on the high end. I can rein that in by going like this.
tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
It's a little muddy over here. I can bring that in.
Is it me or
And I could introduce a dip here
baby,
to keep the mid-range clean and free of reverb.
tell me lies, I just want
And now what I can do is use the mix parameter here
to or die.
to just add a little bit of the reverb that's, that makes it so it's kind of sitting under the vocal.
Can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth. Do or die, is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Bring the width up a little bit.
Tell me lies, I just want to know the truth.
Let's hear that in the mix.
Baby, why can't
like before.
At night, tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you?
So very easy to get your head around reverb, get a sound very quickly, and just keep moving. So the last of the effects is dimension. And these are kind of like old, 60s, 70s style Tame Impala psych rock effects. We have chorus, flanger, and phaser. We can sync the rate to the host tempo as well, a little bit like we did with the delay to go into note values, or disengage this and get hertz. We can change the depth, we can alter the feedback, the width, and frequency as well. And I'll just go through these and you can hear them. I like to leave the mix like very, very low here because I find that too much of the dimension is very pronounced and brings you right back to kind of old music. But used very conservatively with the mix slider, you can get a nice kind of depth and space and halo around the vocal and just give it a bit of a kind of platform, if you will. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. Let's start first with things pretty up so you can hear these chorus, flanger, and phasers, and then I'll tuck them in. So starting off with the chorus.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep?
Here's flanger.
At night? Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die.
And here's phaser.
Is it me or is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you?
So something I like to do is just add a little bit of chorus and just tuck it in. I'll take it all the way out and then I'll bring it up and just like leave it where I think it sounds best.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you? Baby, why?
Bring in a bit of reverb after the dimension. Let's just kind of have some fun here.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night?
Bit of delay.
Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die.
Let's bring up the whole body of the audio here.
Is it you? Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies. I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you?
Let's do a matched before and after. Before.
Baby, why can't you sleep at night? Tell me lies.
After.
I just wanna know the truth. Do or die. Is it me or is it you? Baby, why?
And of course, I can bring in more modules. I can move them around. It's totally up to you. So on the last stop of our modules tour, I want to talk about one more. And lucky for you, I'm going to change the vocalist. Maybe some of you have been waiting for this. I want to show off the harmony module. So I have 2 tracks down here, which currently sound like this.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly if you'd only believe in me. Don't you be like that? I will love you forever if you'd only believe.
What I'm going to do is call up Nectar, just like before. We find it. Pro Tools makes it nice and easy. I just go in, type it in like a Google search, and it pops up. I've added it on my vocal. You guys should know how to do this now. And I'm going to go first to pitch, because remember, pitch and harmony are connected. The pitch informs the harmony module, the scale that it's going to create kind of artificial copies of the vocal around. So in this case, I can see that it's C minor because it's right embedded into the loop there. So I'll stay on C and I'll go to minor, and there we go. I'll turn correction on, and that's going to give a bit of pitch correction to the dry vocal. Now I'm going to go to harmony. And here we have a really cool canvas that we can work with to create artificial copies of the dry vocal to almost simulate a choral effect. And we can add voices by just clicking, a bit like the EQ, right? We have those plus buttons. I just click and then a new node reveals itself. In this case, I click and a new voice shows up, and I can add them all over here. Now, what is this dot right here? Well, this is our main vocal. It's loud because loudness is gain here along this axis, and panning is left and right. So it's right up the middle, and it's very loud, and all of my guys behind it are kind of supporting it, and I can highlight them, I can move them around, I can move just these guys around. Now, where it gets really interesting is the ability for you to, I'm just going to cancel these guys out here, to change the note values of these additional copies of the voice. So I've got my scale set. If I go back here where it's C minor, I'll go back over here. Let's do a third up and just see what that sounds like.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly if you only believe in me.
If I want to hear just what that copy sounds like, I can solo just the voices only by clicking here, and now I get just the voice.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly. Only believe in me. Don't you be like that?
So what you'll notice here is that you get a lot more control over these voices. You can change the octave, delay, obviously the panning and gain is over here, which I can control like this with my mouse. So you can really fine tune the artificial copy of the vocal that you're adding. And of course, for any vocal, you get the same, for any copy rather, you get the same kind of MIDI heads up display here that shows you all the controls for it. So I'm going to add a couple +3s here and sort of have them hover around the vocal, not too loud.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly if you only believe in me. Don't you be like that? I will love you forever if you only believe.
Here's before.
Don't you think like that? I will love you endlessly if you only believe in me.
So over here on the right, we have pitch correction, overall pitch correction for the voices. We can alter the time variation and the pitch variation very subtly or extremely to add a bit of unpredictability so that they don't sound like carbon copies. And one of my favorite features here is that we can also add a filter to filter out low end or high end from the copies of the vocal so that they're not competing so closely with the overall main vocal that is dry and kind of uncopied here. The last thing is we also have MIDI enable. So if what you'd like to do is link your keyboard to your DAW and play your harmonies with your keyboard instead of map them out here, you can press this and enable it. And if you don't kind of know how to route things, hit this little question mark. And Nectar is smart enough to know what DAW that you're in. If you were in Ableton or Logic or whatever, it would show you those DAW specific steps. And it's going to show you, in this case we're in Pro Tools, exactly how to set up your keyboard so that you can control those harmony copies with, whatever MIDI keyboard that you have at your disposal. Thank you so much for watching this video, the first one in this series. Hopefully you feel empowered to crack open Nectar and use it to get a great vocal sound for your next mix. Now that you're steeped in Nectar knowledge, you're probably ready for some hidden or lesser known features that I couldn't fully cover in this video. So please watch 10 hidden features in Nectar using the link that you see right here in this video. Take care.